Hello guys, in this video we're going to be discussing about coordinate geometry. So let's get started. Now imagine I say you to say the exact position of this point. So I give you this point and I tell you to say the exact position of this point. Now you might just say the point is towards the top right corner of the whiteboard or towards top right. Now the top right consists of this whole part. Now this whole part consists of the top right. Now in this there are many points. You can't say the exact position of this point in that. So in order to solve those kind of problems, we have introduced a concept called Cartesian system. So according to this, we're going to divide this plane into 4 different parts. So we have a vertical line or y-axis. So this is y-axis. We call this y-axis or the vertical axis. So the topmost is going to be named as y, whereas the bottommost is going to be named as y dash. Whereas one more axis is going to be horizontal or the x-axis. So this is x and this is going to be x dash. So the point where these two axes meet is called the origin. So where the meet is called origin. Now in these two axes, we divide the line into tiny different parts. So we're going to make equidistant parts on these two axes. So everywhere we're going to make that. So the general rule is anything which is towards the right is taken as positive, whereas anything towards the left is taken as negative. Now depending on the question, the unit might change, but for now we're going to take the unit as 1 2 3 4. So this is going to be 1 2 3 4 5. You need to make sure that every single units are equally placed between each other, whereas the one which is towards the left is taken as negative. So the exact opposite will be written here. So this is taken as -1, this is taken as -2, -3 and -4. In the exact same way, in the vertical axis, anything which is above, anything which goes towards the top is taken as positive, whereas anything which goes below is taken as negative. So make the exact same divisions here, exact same divisions, and we're going to write the units in there. So as I told you, anything which goes up is taken as positive, whereas anything which goes down is taken as negative. So this is 1 2 3 and 4, whereas here it's going to be -1 -2 -3 and -4. Now this was the main introductory part. Now what happens is these two axes divides this plane into 4 different quadrants or 4 different parts. Now this is first quadrant, this is second quadrant, this is third quadrant, whereas this is fourth quadrant. Now if you notice, the it's taken in the form of anti-clockwise. Now the clock moves in this direction, whereas the sign convention of this is taken in the anti-clockwise direction. So this is first quadrant, this is second quadrant, whereas this is third quadrant, whereas this is fourth quadrant. Now let us take the exact example which I gave in the beginning of the video. So this was the point taken, and we were to tell the exact position of that particular point. Now in the case of Cartesian system, we're going to draw perpendicular on x and y axis respectively and tell the coordinates of this point accordingly. So we're going to drop the perpendicular towards the x and we're going to drop a perpendicular towards the y. Now if I take the point as P, the coordinate of these 2 points will be consisting of 2 coordinates, which is x and y coordinate. Now the x coordinate is called the abscissa, whereas the y coordinate is called the ordinate. Now this indicates the distance in the x-axis, whereas this indicates the distance in the y-axis. So in the case of point P, the distance of the point P from the x-axis is 4, whereas in the case of y-axis is going to be 3. So this x is nothing but x distance, whereas y is nothing but the y distance. So this is how you frame the point on the Cartesian system. So now let's try to frame the exact same thing in this second quadrant. So let me take an example of this point. So if I drop the perpendicular towards the x and y axis and try to find the coordinate, let me take this point as Q. So the coordinates of Q is going to be, so x and y coordinates. So x is nothing but the x distance, which is -3, whereas the y is nothing but the y distance, which is +2. So the y distance is +2, whereas the x distance is -3. So if I do the same for the third quadrant, I have to take something like this. I'm going to name this as R. The coordinates of R is going to be, so x distance is -3, whereas the y distance is also -3. So the coordinates of this point is -3, 3. Whereas in the case of fourth quadrant, if I take this as my example, I have to draw the perpendicular towards them, PQRS. So if I take this point as S, the coordinates of S is going to be, so x distance is +4, whereas y distance is -1. So this is how you frame the points in the Cartesian system. Now, if you observe, you can see a pattern in the first, second, and third, third, and fourth quadrant. At any point in the first quadrant is going to be having the sign as positive and positive. How did that come? Now, if you see every single point on the first quadrant, so this is the first quadrant. So we're going to see with respect to these two axes. So this is positive, so x is positive, whereas this is also positive, so y is also positive. Whereas in the second quadrant, the sign is going to be, so this is x, this is y. Anything which is on the x is taken as negative, so this is going to be negative. Whereas anything on y is taken as positive, so the y is going to be positive. So that's why we got -3, +2 in this quadrant. Whereas in the third quadrant, the point is going to be, so x is negative, y is also negative. Remember, the order should always be x y, not y x. If you take y x, it is a mistake. Whereas in the fourth quadrant, so x everything is positive, whereas y everything is negative. So plus comma minus, that's why we got +4 and -1 of any point in this quadrant. So this was the basic introduction of the Cartesian plane. One more thing which you need to remember is any point on the x and y axis respectively. So if I take, say, suppose I take this as my point Q, and I'm asking you to tell the coordinate of this point, you're going to say it as, so the x distance is going to be 2, whereas y distance is 0, so 2 comma 0. Now if you take generally any point on the x axis, it's going to be having a general point of x comma 0. Let me just take this point. So this is 2, so this is x distance is -2, whereas y distance is 0. So -2 comma 0, you're going to observe a pattern of any point on the x axis. It's going to be in the form of x comma 0. Now exactly in the case of y axis, suppose I'm trying to find the coordinate of this point. So the x distance is 0, of this point, whereas y distance is -3. So the coordinates of this particular point is 0 comma -3. So in that way, we can say any general point on the y axis is going to be having the coordinates of 0 comma y. So for example, if I take this point, this is 2.5. So this point is halfway between 2 and 3, so this is going to be 2.5. The coordinates of this point is going to be 0 comma 2.5. So this is how you find any points on a given plane. So now this concept of 2D graphing is used in variety of fields. Taken in the case of physics, mathematics, even if you take in cricket, they use this graphs called current run rate and then required run rate, make a graph, and then they explain you. So it's a very unique way of understanding any given topic to you. So this was about introduction of coordinate geometry or 2D graphing or Cartesian system. So that's the end of the video. If you learned something new, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bar. And I'll meet you in the next video. Thank you.